Welcome to the Purpose Breakthrough Podcast, the podcast for men who are ready to stop chasing fulfillment and start making clear, confident decisions while taking aligned action towards their true purpose. I am your host, Tyler Woods, and my intention is to help you cut through the noise so you can do what you're meant to do. Let's dive deep. Break through to the life you were meant to live. So, thank you, Eric. Welcome. We get joined here by Mr. Eric McTighe.
Glad to be here.
Thanks so much for being a part of this, for jumping in. So, Eric, we'll start with the big questions. Who are you? What do you do? And why is it important?
Who am I? I'm a dad. I'm a meditator. I'm a seeker. Trying to be a finder. I'm a servant. I'm a helper. And, through all the cute BS, I'm a dude who's 45 years old, who built a pretty good career on paper, kind of out of nothing, unexpected. And nobody else would have known it, but I was kind of faking it the whole time, a little bit miserable. Definitely purposeless. But, I kept up the appearance and kept things moving in the right direction. And that's what we all do, right? We just kind of keep plowing ahead until all of a sudden we hit a wall. And, I hit a wall, and we'll probably talk more about that. But hitting that wall just opened up a door for me to live differently, to grow, to have an entirely different experience than I would have had if I didn't hit a wall. And, through that experience, I just realized that I have a lot more choice, and I have a lot more influence over how I live my life and how I show up and, what I do and, what does work look like, and what does being of service look like? And I just kind of went through the shit to end up in a place where a whole new set of potentials opened up. And I was desperate enough and probably dumb enough to go chase them down. And now I work with other people who want to do the same thing in one way or another.
And so why is that? Why is the work you do now? Why is that important work?
The work that I do now is exactly the type of work, teamwork, support, intervention, collaboration that when I was really stuck, I would have benefited from tremendously. And it's not that help and that support and that coaching and that mentoring wasn't available. I just didn't know that it was, and I didn't seek it out. And I probably would have resisted it if it fell in my lap. But now 2.5, 3 years later, I have the benefit of hindsight. And I just have figured out that, what I spent years kind of dragging myself through, I can really make simpler for anybody else who is, in that same kind of spot. And when I say in that same spot, doesn't have to be at the lowest of the lows, like I found myself eventually. In fact, the majority of the people that I'm working with right now are in the middle of very successful careers, are doing very well at life, and still feel like something's missing, and recognize that, feeling like something's missing and recognizing that is kind of the easy part. Knowing what to do about it is hard, and what's even harder is being able to create the space in your already crazy and chaotic life to even dare devote any time and energy and effort to crazy things like purpose and passion, right? We've got bills to pay, we've got kids to take care of, and we've got vacations to take, and we've got holidays coming up and everything else. And, I don't know too many people who wake up and say, man, life is rocking and rolling, and I've just got all this spaciousness. Like there's just so much room in front of me. And,
Mm.
what do I do with all this room? I mean, it's just not how we exist, right? And so if we want to make change, we have to create space for it. Um,
Mm.
so that's the
So
work I'm
let's
doing these days.
got it. Yeah. So creating space. So let's back up a bit. You mentioned that this time in the past you felt stuck. What did it mean to you? How did it feel when you were stuck? And tell me a little bit about that wall that you encountered that kind of changed things for you to see it differently. Because you mentioned just like whatever resources that were out there, you couldn't even see them.
Mm. Yeah. So I kind of I look at my story and there's like uh, two moments of stuck, right? The first one was in like 2015, end of 2015, 2016. My entire career from that point, since I graduated college in 2001. I'm 15 years into my career. Um, and every step in that 15 years was a step up, a step forward, a promotion, bigger scope of responsibility, whatever it was. In sales and marketing organizations, I've had every title from individual contributor to VP and everything in between. And for the first 15 years, it just was a stair step, right? And
Mm,
then 2015, a lot of life changes, divorce, uh, got divorced while living away from both of us were living away from home. And so divorce and then a big relocation. And then the
mm,
company that I was working for, where I was a vice president of marketing, changes happened with that company, and headquarters were moving from the East Coast out to the Midwest. And recently divorced. That wasn't a move that I could make. And just it felt to me like all these things were happening around me and outside of me that I didn't have control over. And up until that point in my life, I'd always done a really good job of keeping everything in control. And that's how we were able to just keep moving in this direction, right? Like our ability to progress was directly related to my ability to think that I was maintaining control. And so then at the end of 2015, early 2016, um, things changed around me that I simply couldn't control. And that was new for me.
mm-hmm,
And, um, that company relocated. I couldn't make that move geographically, so I left that company. Um, and thankfully, at that point in my life, I had financial resources that, I didn't have to go jump right into another job. I could think about what I wanted to do. I could, open up some new opportunities. Um, I stayed in the same industry. I went to work for a startup company. Always worked for very large companies in the industry I was in. I went and started to work for this startup company, one of the first five people hired for the sales organization. Got to build my own team. So, like, it was a step back in terms of title, but I got to do a whole lot of new things that I hadn't had the chance to do before, like build an entire team from scratch and, launch brand new products all at once and launch a brand new company all at once, all this fun stuff. And I thought it was great. And I can look back now and realize that that was just the first band-aid. Like
mm,
2015, all these things start to happen. I don't feel like I have control over them. And what I started to do was just grab for band-aids and plug the holes wherever I could. And, hey, covered up the unemployed hole, got a new job, great. Covered up the step back in terms of job title and scope of responsibility by saying, yeah, but I'm going to a startup and building from scratch, great. I just got real good at figuring out how to avoid all the problems, all the points of conflict, all the judgment that I could see out in front of me, right? But that was also kind of like the first step back down. And all I can tell you is that from 2016 until 2000, let's say 21, early 22, it was a slow step down to a plummet,
mm,
just a plummet. I mean, life just fell apart, career fell apart, everything just fell apart. And so that kind of then led me to the second, moment that I look back on and reflect on. Um, and that was just desperation. I was a functioning alcoholic. I had been laid off, or companies went under, or I got let go, on again, off again, with, I don't know, 3 or 4 companies, something like that, in about a 3 year stretch, you know. Um, and so life wasn't great, but it was also starting to really reveal some chinks on the inside, right?
Mm,
Like everything around me, I couldn't plug all those holes. And then that's when things got really bad because then, oh shit, there's all these holes inside of me and I have no idea how to plug them. I've never focused on what's in here. I've always focused on managing what's out there. And
yeah.
so, you know, I think I've shared with you in the past, but I found myself in a place where I was just kind of done. I mean, I was done. I couldn't see a path forward. I couldn't see how to rebuild a life. I couldn't see how to rebuild a career. I couldn't see how to rebuild my finances. I just couldn't see it. And so I was done. I was ready to be done. And I just had this moment of surrender. I'm not a religious person, hadn't been a religious person, wasn't a spiritual person either, didn't have a whole lot of belief in anything bigger than me. Um, and so there was absolutely no good reason, nothing in my past to make me say, I need some help. But I did. I surrendered literally to the emptiness. I didn't ask a person. In fact, I retreated from people as much as I could,
Hmm.
trying to keep up the facade. But silently and in desperation, I had this moment of surrender. And I didn't realize it at the time. I realize it now that, people hear the word surrender and it sounds like desperation. And I was desperate,
Hmm.
but it sounds like a Hail Mary. It sounds like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to quit. Surrender it just feels like I give up. And that's not at all what it is. And I realize today that surrender is actually, surrender and desire are like this, right? Because when we surrender, when we just say, however we say it, when we just say, listen, I acknowledge I don't have a clue. I don't know what to do. I can't control all the things around me. I don't know how to fix the stuff that's broken inside of me. I surrender. I give up, right? I not give up. I give in. I give in.
Mm,
And that's an expression of desire to not want to stay in that space, desire to want to be saved, desire to want to be helped, desire to want to have that path forward. And, I kind of found out on my own that if you surrender to something greater than yourself, whatever you want to call it, whatever you believe in, if you are willing to surrender to something greater than yourself, you tell that something, I desire your guidance. I desire your assistance. I desire your intervention. I can't do this on my own. And now I acknowledge that. And that was my kind of
mm,
pivotal stage.
yeah. Mm. Your story is, well, there's a what is a phrase in men's work is your work is my work because your story mirrors that of my own and so many men that I come into contact with, right? Going through life kind of trapped in our heads, just like, okay, I've got a giant to-do list for the rest of my life. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to control my ability to get them done. And if I get enough of them done, then I'm going to feel good about life, right?
I win,
I
right? I win.
win. Yeah. And inevitably, something goes not according to plan. And what I loved about what you shared is that it was a band-aid. It was a band-aid for not looking at all of the stuff inside, right? So, the hero's journey, there's always a first call, and the hero always refuses that first call, right? It's like, no, I got this. It's fine. I found this new shiny object that's going to take my attention away from all this stuff. We're going to go do that instead.
Yes. Yeah, we get real good at, I just saw, I don't remember who it was. Somebody posted on this today, on LinkedIn, but we get real good at, um, acquiring distractions. And I don't just mean like acquiring material things, but we do a real good job at bringing distractions into our sphere, um, subconsciously, unconsciously, to kind of, um, keep us busy and keep us occupied so that we don't dare start diving into here and start diving into here, right?
Mm.
Our ego doesn't want us to do that. Our ego doesn't know how to do that work. Our ego knows how to play defense against what's out there. And it knows how to tell us like, hey, don't mess with anything. I got this. I'm playing defense. You just sit there, right? Our ego doesn't want us to really take a close look. So our ego is really good at bringing distractions into our sphere so that we don't have time to even notice that we're not looking.
Mm. And so you mentioned that the work you do now, right, is helping people create the space to look at that, to look at that feeling of there's something else and there's something more. So I'd love to talk a bit about, you know, how can how can the man who recognizes that life is so busy begin to get in touch with that there's something else without going to the complete depths of losing everything?
Yep. Um, I would say in most every case that the necessary first step, not a great first step, not a nice first step, but the necessary first step for men and women, but like you, I spent a lot of time talking to men. That first step is forgiving yourself. It's forgiveness because by the time you get to a place where you say, I really want to do this thing. I really want to focus on me. I really want to fix what's in here. I really want to feel better. I really want to live better. I want my days to not suck so much, right? By the time you get to that point, you have already built up so much crap. And not only have you built up crap in all that's happened and all that you've experienced, you've 10x'd that crap with all your opinions and your judgments about it.
Mm,
And you're not aware of it, but those opinions and those judgments run through your head. And the first time you have this notion, like, I really want to do this, I really need to do this for me, all of a sudden that soundtrack just starts playing at a 12, right? And it starts pointing out to you all the reasons that you can't, shouldn't, won't, whatever it may be. It might be guilt, it might be fear, it might be shame. Whatever your ego has gotten really comfortable with, it's going to push that right to the forefront of your mind, and you're gonna feel so stupid inside. You're
mm,
gonna feel so stupid for thinking that you could fix anything or that you deserve anything to be better or that you should focus on you when you've got this long list of things that require your attention and you don't have enough time for them. How in the world are you going to pick you first to start working on it? Our mind doesn't let us do it. Our mind just doesn't let us do it. So to answer your question, where does it start? In my opinion, it almost always starts with forgiveness because
mm,
you have to find a way. As we're working with a coach or a mentor, or even just a friend who has done some of this work before, just if you can get to a space where you can be vulnerable enough to open up to another human being where you're
mm,
at, right? Whoever it is that you're opening up to is probably someone that you know on some level, and that person is almost always guaranteed to remind you um, of something good. That's been my experience, right? They remind you of something good, even if it's not something they tell you directly, right? Just being in their presence or opening up and being vulnerable with that person. Something about it just creates for you something good. And if you can hold on to that, if you can recognize it and acknowledge it and hold on to it and build off it, it's a great place to start forgiving yourself. You have to remember, you know this. We talk in this kind of work a lot about, my job is to help you remember who you are, right? And that's not what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about right now is in a very real world, material world, tangible kind of way. You have to forgive yourself for whatever it is that is telling you you don't deserve to pay attention to and work on yourself. That's where it starts.
mm. Yeah, got that. So in a way, it's kind of recognizing the interconnectedness of one human to another, right? Being part of life is I see this journey of myself and so many men in the past as a journey of disconnection. We're disconnected from life, we're in the mind, and we are separate. And in a way, it is a return to a sense of oneness, a returning of being part of humanity, right? Reaching out to another human being, be like, hey, I'm a human, you're a human, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
It's like taking it out of the mind and putting it out there and having it be witnessed, almost like reconnecting a circuit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great analogy. The concept and discussion around separateness again is, it's a big thing in the kind of space we live in and the kind of work that we do. So, I forgot the gentleman's name. I just heard him speak maybe 2 weeks ago. He talked about, what's the impact of this, broadly speaking, this sense of separateness that we have. And he said, really, three things end up coming out of that. It's sadness, anger, and fear. And so because we are separate, we in our minds, we exist separate from everyone and everything else. And I don't mean like the people, just we are separated from everyone and everything else. And what we realize in being separated is that there are haves and have-nots. And we experience on some level some kind of sadness around that. And have and have-nots doesn't just mean financially, right? It's resources, it's access, it's community, it's connection, it's whatever it may be. But because we are separated, we instantly realize that we're not all the same. There is, difference in what's available to us between us. So we have sadness around that on some level. And then we develop, or it moves into this stage of anger. And so because now we're angry, that's how we show up and that's how we engage. And again, it can be in super subtle ways, like we don't know it, but even when something good happens, it's not crazy for us to subconsciously be angry about what hasn't happened, or be angry about how long it took to happen, or be angry that it happened this way and not that way, or whatever the case may be. And so we struggle with anger. And then it brings us to fear. And this is where I spend probably 85% of my time working with people is we end
Mm,
up at fear because we're separate. Separate means different. Different means it creates a space for sadness to blossom and to grow, which creates resentment and anger. But then we also have this realization that, um, well, maybe I have this great job, but I could lose it. Maybe I have this great home, but that could go away, right? So even when we have everything that we need, and by the way, we all always have everything that we need, even though we have everything that we need, and even if we're aware of it, we still always have this underlying fear that it can be taken from us because we're not connected to anything, right? We're separate. We're separated. And that whole concept of separateness takes a little while. Some people get it right away and they're like, oh yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And other people, it really takes time because, well, I've got a great network and I've got my friends and I've got my and you feel like you're connected, but
mm,
there is that level that exists for all of us, most of us, where there's just this context, this framework, this paradigm of separateness that just doesn't go away. And
mm,
that's running all the time, regardless of what our emotion is. So even when we're happy, we're still afraid. Even when things are good, we're still fearful. And that fear, man, it messes up your life. Messes up your
mhm.
life.
Yeah.
With between the Go ahead.
When we tie our ability to be okay to stuff, to things, the situations in our life, like you said, it sets up a paradigm where we're doomed to fail, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm setting myself up to get everything I want, but really it's like it's stacked upon this little like tiny rock of fear. It's precariously balanced on like I have everything I want as long as it doesn't go away. I'm
Right.
okay as long as it doesn't all it's got to go the way that I want it, right? Hence the control, hence the just like I got to architect my life out there to make sure everything in here is okay.
And so what's the next step after that? because I agree with you, right? That all everything you just said, I couldn't agree with you more. But I love that analogy of like everything's okay, right? But I've built it on this little stone of fear. So everything's great. I've got to balance it, but then I've also got to maintain it, right? And so what that ends up turning into, and we have no idea that it's happened, but what that ends up turning into is every waking moment is a moment of conflict or competition or obstacle. And when I say every moment, I mean every moment like, should I marry this person? Should I take this job? Should I make this move? Should I pursue that? All the way down to what am I going to get for dinner tonight? Like what am I going to feed the family for dinner tonight, right? So like all the big stuff and all the little stuff, it still all just boils down to it's a problem, it's a conflict, it's an issue. It requires resolution.
And I
There's
wouldn't want to make the wrong choice, right? You don't want to
no,
make the
well,
wrong
no, you
choice. You
can't make the
always want
wrong.
to do the right choice.
You can't make the wrong choice. If you make the wrong choice, it that's the first step in it all falling apart. And so we spend our whole lives just mitigating fear and anxiety and I had this conversation earlier today where it ultimately leads us. We think we're choosing things, and we're not choosing anything. We are defaulting to the option that we believe is the least fearful or keeps pain and anxiety at bay or whatever. We just default into what we think is available. That's not choosing, right? That's not choosing. And so, I'll bring us back just a little bit. We started the conversation talking about spaciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talk with people all the time. My work is to help show somebody how they can create spaciousness, and in the interim, I create it and hold it for them, right? We create spaciousness because we need that spaciousness to be able to gain some clarity. And if we can sit in that clarity without judgment, without opinion, if we can just sit in that moment of clarity and observe and get to a place of knowing, then we can cultivate certainty. And when you have certainty, when you have this firm foundational, I'm going to say belief, but it's more than that. It's a knowingness. When you have a knowingness about something, now you can choose. Because when you know that nothing hangs in the balance so terrible that the whole thing's going to fall down, well, now you can make some choices. And when you start to live your life by making choices, what you then realize is, holy shit, like I was defaulting to, one of a handful of options, just trying to keep this whole thing together. Now you're telling me I have this infinite view of potentials that are super interesting and really curious. And man, that one right there really, I'm going to go do that, right? So you don't have those options. You don't see those potentials. If you don't have some certainty to operate from instead of balancing fear, and you can't get certainty if you can't find a space of clarity, and you can't achieve clarity if you can't create some spaciousness in your existence to sit with it.
Hmm. In your experience, when you hit that wall and surrendered and created the space to kind of be open to possibility,
Mhm.
when you realized that you could do anything or be anything you wanted in this infinite possibility, what did you feel looking back on the way you were doing things, the way you were following the path of least fear? Was there joy? Was there grief? Was there
Um, that's a great question. And it's not what I thought you were asking me initially. Um, I'll have to think on what the feeling and what the emotion was in that moment, but I'll tell you what the realization was. The realization was I'd never actually chosen a damn thing in my life. And when I had that realization, and for me, the first choice, the first actual choice that I made was sobriety. And when I made that choice, I didn't know that I didn't know that I'd had that moment of surrender, and I didn't know that I was going to start this journey and start this work. But I did know that I was miserable and I had no idea how to fix it, and I wasn't going to fix anything drunk, period.
yes.
And so for the first time in my life, I chose me. I forgave me for getting to the place that I'd gotten to. I chose me, and I chose to be sober. And people look at me side-eyed every time I say this because they just don't believe it. And I get it. If somebody had said it to me 2 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it either. But when I tell people that, I go out to dinner with my fiance and she gets a fruity cocktail, something that just sounds great. Let me taste that. I can taste that alcoholic drink, and I'm not going to drink tomorrow. Uh, I can be around people who drink, and it doesn't faze me in the least. But the reason is I'm not keeping myself sober by avoiding temptation and avoiding getting sucked back in. I live sober because I choose to. I choose to. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm still an alcoholic. There are going to be people who see this, I'm sure, who are in recovery, who are recovering, who have, gone through an AA or a 12-step program and have fought really hard. I had two starts and stops with AA. So when I tell you I applaud folks who have been successful with it, I mean it. But I wasn't going to be, because whatever AA is or isn't, in my mind, it was, we're going to teach you how to keep alcohol away. Well, I'd spent my whole life keeping stuff
Mm.
away, right? So anyway, I think you asked me what was the moment, or what was the emotion that I had at that time of surrender. I don't know the emotion, but the revelation was that I could actually make choices in my life. And for me, the
Mm.
first one was sobriety. And I
Mm.
built everything off of that. I learned everything. And some of the stuff that I teach other people and coach other people, I cultivated, created everything built off of that choice to be sober and be present in my life.
Mm. Yeah. I asked that question because in my own experience, as well as working with other men, the the realization that we are a conscious being, a choice, when there's been a past history of feeling absolutely stuck and there's no choice, can bring up grief of just like, wow, it could have been like this, but it wasn't. Wow, but it's like this now. Right? So
Yeah.
there's almost a period of like, kind of mourning what
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah. Mourning is a great word. I definitely, I definitely went through, and to be honest with you, Tyler, I probably went through again fairly recently, let's say within 6 months, you know, this feeling of it's just a little too late. Like
Mm.
like this is great. Having done this work is great. The way I feel is great. I'm grateful for all of it. The rest of this existence will be different and better than it otherwise would have been. And that's fantastic. But I got there just a little too late, and I'm not going to get to do everything that I really wish I would, or wish I could. Um, and realizing that that's not true at all, ever. Um, that was a gift more recent than that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. Because what is that? Is that a thought? Is that a thing that you could choose to believe? Right?
Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
thinking that? Who's thinking that thought?
Who said it's too late? Who's thinking that thought? I love it. It's one of my favorite things. Who's thinking that thought? Who says it's too late?
Yeah.
Not like who says it's too late, but who, like really, truly, who is saying that it's too late? And is that voice the one that makes decisions, or is that the voice the one that narrates experiences? Oh, did I lose
So
you?
often,
Oh, there we go.
I'm still here. Great.
Yep, gotcha. I
Yeah.
thought we froze up again.
All good. Yeah. So often it's just like the voice that beats you up in your head, and the voice that says you can't do that. It's not even your voice. It's not even you, right? It's
Hmm.
who you were taught by. It's your parents. It's the church. It's God. It's whatever was the loudest voice growing up that just is still there, showing up.
Yep.
And you feel you have no choice but to listen to it because
Yep.
it's just the loudest one.
Yep. And you know, that sort of those fundamental and most basic things that we get from the adults and the the authorities in our life from a young age, for a lot of people, certainly not everyone, but for a lot of people, you look back and you say, well, those people love me, right? They love me. And so the fact that you trust them, the fact that you know that you matter to them, the fact that you know that they would always have your best interest at heart makes dismantling some of those programs and some of that belief really hard, really hard. Yeah.
Mm, right.
Forgiveness there too, right? There's
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 forgiveness there.
there's a ton of forgiveness there too. There's a ton of forgiveness there too. Because you
Yeah.
realize what you realize and you're pissed, right? You realize what you realize, you're grateful. You're like, oh man, this is great. And then you're pissed. And you're like, why didn't you tell me? You're supposed to know these things. They were supposed to know these things, you know? And it brings you right back to that separateness, right? And that separateness is a whole lot of different things, but that separateness puts you in a place of I'm here and everything that happens is happening around me and to me, right? And so those programs, well intentioned as they were, they happened to me. They were done to me. And then you're pissed. And so then you gotta work through that, right? And that's what this kind of work is. You know this. You move through something and you get to a good place and the next thing is right there. And it's not like the next thing to deal with. It's in getting through the hard spot to the good place. You can't be in the good place without also being confronted with this, yeah, but what about this or this paradox or this,
Mm.
how are you gonna resolve this newfound reality, whatever it may be.
Hmm. Right. It's almost like you can't examine this new way of being from your old paradigm that you used to, right? This is another problem to solve.
Mm.
Like as you become more in touch with who you are and what's got you to this point, what's working and what's not working, it's just like you can't examine through that lens anymore, right?
Mm.
It's almost like you're coming around this spiral, running into the same things, but getting a different view on it every time. It's
Yep.
like, oh, well, maybe this time actually I don't judge it with anger and frustration. Maybe what if I forgive this, right?
Yep. What if is
What if?
a great question. If anybody watching this is trying to move themselves through, right? It's a hard path, but if I could give them any advice, just when you're stuck on something, just ask yourself, what if, right? Wherever you are and whatever is uncomfortable or undesirable about it, instead of trying to figure it out, just sit down, create some spaciousness, some quietness, some stillness, and just ask yourself, what if? What if this wasn't how I felt? What if this barrier, obstacle, challenge, whatever, didn't exist? Or what if I could leave that? What if I didn't carry that with me? What if that didn't happen? I mean, what if there's something about it that just opens your mind up? If you can quiet the voice, right? If you can quiet the noise, asking what if, that just expands the field of view, right? You can see something more than you can when you're stuck in being unhappy.
Mm,
I think it's a great question.
yeah. And I know you're a big proponent of meditation. How does meditation help get people to a place where they can actually ponder what if? Talk about quieting voices.
Yeah. I think my personal opinion, my experience is that um, meditation evolves as we evolve, right? So like I do a lot of different meditative and mindfulness practices and techniques. And when I was first starting and working with myself, I just made a bunch of stuff up, right? Like I just tried something, like let's see what works. And today, today I have a much more structured, very effortless, but much more structured and consistent practice that I do daily. Um, and so what that practice is for me today is different than what meditation or mindfulness was before. But at its most basic level, I would tell somebody that meditation is meditation and mindfulness is a way to create space. It's quiet, whatever you want to call it, right? It quiets the noise. It slows down all the movement. However you visualize it or feel it that works best for you, but it creates a space. And if you can sit, and I don't mean literally sit, but if you can exist, if you can reside and be aware in that spaciousness, it just expands your field of view. And in that expanded field of view, you have new potentials, you have new what ifs, you have new maybes that you can observe, that you can contemplate, that you can envision 2 and 3 and 4 steps down the road.
Mm.
You can't do that if your mind is filled with all the stuff that has happened and all the stuff that you're worried about happening. And that's what spaciousness is. Spaciousness exists right here. Spaciousness doesn't exist in the past. It doesn't exist in the future. Spaciousness is the supreme present moment. And if you're in the supreme present moment, that's enough of a change for somebody just getting started, because I guarantee they haven't spent a moment in that space. So that's what I would tell people. Try to meditate. It can be sitting, can be quiet, can be active. I try and post, totally different types of meditation techniques on LinkedIn, and I talk with people one-on-one, and, I'll meditate with somebody. Somebody says, "Hey, would you meditate with me?" I'll meditate with them. Like, would you teach me how to meditate? I'll teach you 2 or 3, and then I'll meditate with you anytime. Right? Because I know that if they can let themselves have that experience of spaciousness and not being bombarded with everything else and not having to try and fight off in their mind or their emotions everything that's coming at them, if they can just create some space for themselves, they've already shown themselves that there is more, that there is other, that there's something different.
Beautiful.
And we work on clarity, because there's a whole lot of different, right? And so then we got to start making sense of it. And so then we need some clarity. And then when we get real clear on things, like I said, we cultivate that certainty. And when you operate from a place of certainty instead of operating from a place of fear, your life is just lived differently.
Amazing.
It is.
Well,
it is amazing.
Well, Eric, where can people find out more about who you are and what you do? Connect with you.
The best thing to do, the only place you'll find me is on LinkedIn. I'm not on any other social media. LinkedIn and I have had a unique relationship over the years. We're good friends right now. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't know that the algorithm loves me quite as much, but nonetheless, you can find me on LinkedIn. And if somebody wants to email me, it's real easy. It's eric.mctighe@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Go meditate with Eric. You might just have a breakthrough. Eric, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing the transmission of what you do and helping folks find clarity. Feeling spacious.
Thanks, brother. I love you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning into the Purpose Breakthrough Podcast and for investing in yourself today. If you're ready to stop chasing fulfillment and want to start making clear, confident decisions while doing the work you're meant to do, head over to tylerizit.com. There you can learn more about working with me to create a life of true purpose and alignment. This is just the beginning.